Check out this story from The Independent. Biggest crash in world history. Personal finance expert Robert Kiyosaki predicts economic crisis in October. A crash is a really good time to get rich, says author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, I don't believe him. It's a bit much to be like, this month it'll happen. However, I don't not believe him. You know, because we just had Bob Murphy on, The Economist, PhD economist, say that they removed the restrictions on fractional reserve banking, the reserve requirement. So basically, banks can just print money and give it out.
Yeah.
So here, let me just read a little bit. They say personal finance expert Robert Kiyosaki warned the crash is coming, regardless of whether the U.S. debt ceiling is raised or what measures are imposed by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen or Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. This is going to be the biggest crash in world history. We have never had this much debt pumped up. The debt to GDP ratio is out of sight. Mr. Kiyosaki said the stock market was being artificially inflated by the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve with decisions disconnected from the realities of the current economy in the U.S. The reason why Ms. Yellen and Mr. Powell are scrambling, he said, is they've expanded the volume of money while the velocity of money is plummeting as no one spends and their cash lingers in savings. He says, quote, so they pump all this money in, prices go up. So it is transitory inflation, but we're stacked with this massive debt. And all it's done is bump up the stock market and real estate market. The money has not gone into the economy. That's the sad part. So the rich get richer, but the poor and middle class are getting poorer. It's tragic what's happening today. You can't keep printing fake money. That's not good.
Yep. I've noticed it when I was buying my crystals and rocks, as I told you, especially my opals.
Yes.
People aren't spending, so the people that have this load of assets they need to unload have to drop the price. These people are slashing the prices by 80% to offload their assets, so the rich people can buy up all the assets now because desperate people are selling.
But that's not essentials. At the same time, the land, for instance, people are like, wow, they're desperate to get out of cities. The stuff they really need, the prices are skyrocketing.
So if there is a crash, what would happen to like land prices? Would
skyrocket.
They would skyrocket.
Well, here's my bet. There's a lot of arguments you could give to why land would crash, because if people don't have money, they can't buy. So that means people are trying to sell, have to lower their prices. Or it could be that land is a necessity. And people in cities who can't afford to live anymore will be desperate to leave, which will it'll put the pressure on those trying to leave. What we're seeing right now, in my opinion, the crash is happening. The M1 money stock is insane, even after they change the definitions and the rules. And you've got people trying to leave cities for the country. I am seeing it in these prices. It is insane how much money we have to spend to try and expand, even into West Virginia, because people are like, my garbage land is now worth, a fortune. Mm-hmm. So what I think would happen is if the crash gets worse, it will just continue the trend we're already seeing. People in New York will be like, I don't need opals. Please buy the opals from me. And they're going to be like, what's it worth? It's $100 opal. I'll give you $20. Fine, please, just take it.
And by the way,
I can't do anything with an opal.
I'm buying the opals to teach children about rocks and stones. That's the investment.
Investing in the future.
No, but look.
I love it.
This is the point I've always made. You know, when Alex Jones would say on his show, buy your gold, people, I'd be like, okay, it's the apocalypse. The economy is crashing. And I'm walking down the street and I see a guy with a big old pile of gold and I've got a sandwich in my hands and he says, hey, I'll buy that sandwich off you for a piece of gold. And I say, I look to my right and there's a guy with a bottle of water. And he says, I'll share my water with you and for some of your sandwich. And I'll be like, I'm thirsty. And that's substantially more valuable than a shiny rock.
Mm-hmm. And they'll say, hey, you want water and food, but you don't have money for it? What do you have to offer us? Blood. Literally, you can donate blood. We need your biometrics.
I don't know about
your DNA.
In an apocalypse, like,
what would you trade? Because
what's
going to happen
is
it depends what
Start of the apocalypse, I guess.
Necessities are going to skyrocket, like water and food is going to skyrocket.
Yes.
And if people can't afford it, what do they have to offer other than their own bodies?
Yes. That's a good
Yes,
point.
indeed.
But I was saying, like, in the analogy on the side of the road, I didn't quite understand why someone on the side of the road would be like, I have an IV.
I know, isn't that crazy?
But yeah, people will have to, they'll do a lot of things. They'll do a lot of things trying to survive. But I asked this question before. What is the one thing that is the hardest to produce, but is commonly used in homes?
Chemicals?
Yeah. Bleach.
Well, I said antiseptics.
Yeah.
I don't think most people know how to make an antiseptic. You can probably make a rudimentary alcohol if you know how to, distill things.
Yeah.
But that's not super easy. So I'm thinking, like, what is the hardest thing to produce that we use every day?
Soap.
Soap's not that hard to make. But yes.
Relative to how frequently it's used, it's kind of...
Soap is good, but I feel like antiseptics. So I bought a bunch of mouthwash and isopropyl alcohol and hydrogen peroxide. Things that, like, in the event of an injury, you want to clean your wound. Because back in the day, you stub your toe and it's like, chop your leg off. You got an infection.
Yep. Want vitamins too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah. I think that's one of the positives over the last year and a half of people realizing we should take vitamins.
Yep. I take C, D, B, and a multivitamin and magnesium ever since the pandemic. I've been, that's almost
zinc. Yeah.
as needed.
I notice people washing their hands in public restrooms.
Zinc, yeah, it's great.
There are a lot of people who have urban property investments that are going to drop to nothing. No one's going to want to be in New York City when they're struggling to get resources into the city. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And so if you bought a condo or apartment in New York, I can't imagine you're having a good go of it, trying to get out of there, especially with the lockdowns.
Yeah, like an hour and a half north of the New York City, there are homes that were $200,000 that are now $600,000, $700,000, right? And people are moving there. And it's like a lot of my friends, I'm 36, a lot of our parents moved up from the city in the 80s. So they witnessed the collapse of the city in the 70s when everything was on fire and it was terrible, it was bankrupt. So now all of that hour and a half north is kind of full, although people are now moving to go maybe to Florida. But the hour now north of us is what's being filled in, upstate, real upstate New York.
Have you noticed? I don't know if you've checked city prices though. Have they been going down?
I haven't. I can't imagine.
Yeah, they're spiking right now, but you made a great point that the real value of city land is not going to escalate if it gets difficult to.
Oh, it's going to be like Escape from New York. People are
great movie, by the way.
Great movie.
I was there when Sandy hit New York.
Oh yeah.
And like I went to a bodega.
I was too.
I was like, I'm hungry. Let's go to a bodega. They had two guys standing outside with 2x4s and a line of people waiting to get in, one at a time. They were only allowed in. And I went in. The guy said the stuff in the fridge is all spoiled, but the dry goods are still good. And I was like, okay. And then I looked in the fridge, and it's like, okay, the Gatorade is still good. The sodas are just warm, but all the milk, all the dairy, all the perishables just gone. So this is an interesting concept. Like things that have value. This is what I was thinking about when people are buying like even NFTs. I think NFTs would probably drop dramatically in value if there's an economic crash.
Art. Yeah, they're just art basically.
But maybe not. Maybe not.
I mean, that's one way to use them as art. You can do them for contracts and stuff like that
right.
too.
I think NFTs would probably go down, but I do think crypto would skyrocket because people are going to need a digital means of transaction in the event it becomes harder with the way banks operate. But we'll see. I don't know if the banking system would be, as negatively affected. But if banks start going under and banks start closing, and then all of a sudden you're like, where's my money? But I will say, like, I think there are certain hard assets that will become substantially less valuable or stay the same, and then rural land is probably going to become massively valuable.
Realistically, how valuable is gold anyway? I mean, I know it's useful as like a superconductor, but
actually really, really valuable.
Yeah, but for the common person though.
No, yeah, it's really valuable. Yeah. The problem is we value it for its like, its shininess instead of its scientific processes.
Right.
It's a scarce, valuable object. The scarcity drives it. We do use it in a lot of technologies, and it's extremely valuable in that regard, but we don't really value it for that. That value does help drive up the cost, though. But I don't know if we'll get to that point with economic collapse where, like, a bottle of water will be worth $100 or something ridiculous.
That could happen easily.
It could, but I don't know if we'll get to that point.
Right.
Even if we face a major economic crisis, people still work, people still make stuff. I'm thinking about how crazy everything's gotten, and I'm watching Fox News, and I'm like, what I realized? People watch the news, and the news is doing the same thing it always does. The guy goes, Bill Hemmer's on TV, and he's like, Afghanistan happens, and they assume, like, see, everything's fine. Because they assume, like, the TV would shut off, like in the movies. Go to any one of these countries. Look at the history of any one of these countries that went through revolution, even Afghanistan. The economy is still struggling along, even in Afghanistan. People are still working. People are still going out and buying food. It doesn't just cease to exist. So you can absolutely be watching your TV program while the world is collapsing around you and not realize it because this TV show is giving you this veil.
Yeah, they pick and choose the apocalypse, right? Like if it's a migrant caravan a few years ago, that's all we saw on the news. If it's a migrant caravan now, you don't really see much of it.
You got to go to the borders of 10 cities. You got to go to the Ventura report on Instagram and see Jorge standing there recording them,
wild.
Taking boats across the river.
I think they're just talking about the border.
Yeah.
I don't think they're ignoring it. I think it's a huge story. But yeah, now they're estimating 400,000 migrants, coming up in the next month. Yeah. I look at that and I'm just like, look, call it pessimistic or just call it what it is. How can you watch all of this happen and then say, Tim is wrong, the Republic is in good shape? We had a guest on the show. I'm not going to call him out. After the show, he asked me, or like we were talking, I don't know if he asked me or if I brought it up, something about like, you really think things are going to fall apart? And I was like, they're literally falling apart. And he was like, nah, I think it's fine. I think this is just like, news and everything's going to be fine. And then I was like, how can you witness the street violence, the shootings, the fire bombings, the executive authority, the rule by edict, what happened on January 6th, Antifa riots, and just be like, nothing is happening. I'm like, yo, history is happening right now in your face, but you're a frog in a pot as the water is turning up and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, I'm always trying to make sure that I'm not saying that this is the end, because I'm always like kind of paranoid. I'm like, this has got to be the end. But then when it starts to be the end, like when COVID hits and it starts to tilt down, I'm like, no, it's fine, right? But then my grandfather was a cop in the city in the 70s. That was the end for him, right? Like, but also when he was younger, he saw an atom bomb fall out of the sky. I mean, he thought it was the end then. Yeah. But this feels different, maybe because we're of a certain age and experiencing it. We might have families and houses and all that stuff, and all that's collapsing. But something does feel different than what my grandfather would tell me.
I think maybe the issue is that we call it the end. When it's not the end, it's a change, it's a transition.
Yeah, for sure.
The American empire couldn't last forever. Soviets couldn't last forever. And that's what's happening. So I said this the other day, and maybe it's a good thing. Maybe what happens is if you live in New Hampshire, all of a sudden the country breaks apart. The federal government has no authority, as we've already seen with California's sanctuary state decree. The emperor has no clothes. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, you got no income tax and you can have guns. I don't think people in New Hampshire are going to be upset about what's going on. And I think people will absolutely adapt to the circumstances, meaning they'll raise their own food. People will, there's going to be a hole in the market. Someone's going to be like, hey, now that we're struggling to get the imports in, we can't get avocados or strawberries because those are seasonal and have to cross, very, very far and require a lot. We don't have a whole lot of food out here. And someone's going to be like, I could grow food and make money doing it. Whoa. Farming will become more valuable. It'll go back to basics. People will start valuing good, hard work all over again. There's a lot of value in that because people are going to spend more time with their families. They're going to be more responsible for themselves and get away from this, I don't know, just start naming off the 7 deadly sins and you can describe New York City. Yeah. And that'll start changing, maybe for the better.
Yeah. That's why I'm not completely depressed about everything. It seems it's really bad, but I like that. I like that people are returning to that kind of thing.
It's actually a super red pill to me, and this is something that I've been talking about a little bit because I feel like, the cycle, weak men create bad times create strong men. Well, we're going into bad times. We're going to come up with some really strong people. I think that's good. I think that's positive. And I think that's something humans have been doing for thousands of years. There's no reason to suspect that this would be any different. Right. So to me, that's very positive.
Yeah. Yeah. My, my grandparents, their parents fled pogroms in Russia.
Oh, wow.
There were people running to their towns with axes. Whoa. And hacking them up. And they left and they took a boat to here. And when they got there, this is my grandma's father, one of 4 children, he had a scab on his head. They said, you got to go back. So she went back with the kids to the pogroms and had to hide out for the scab to heal and then take the boat back. Wow. Right?
Oh my gosh.
That's apocalyptic. Right? Yeah. They made it, and I have a grandma.
They had to go back because the scar would have given the person away as a fleer.
No, it was like from a cut that he had from something else.
But it could be disease or something.
Could be disease. That's what they were thinking. Yeah, like they were like, we don't know what this is. You could leave the kid or send the kid back, and you stay here.
That's bold.
So I think of that.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.